Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night with Mike and
Delaney
Delaney Spencer from
and Oslo.
Oslo's here today. Oz. Do you call him Ozzy?
Yeah, Ozzy Osbourne.
Well, yeah.
Bit
He bit the head off a bat. I think
bad. Yeah.
that's what he's
Mhm.
famous for. Did he do that? Did Ozzy do your
Yeah,
Ozzy do
I think
that?
that was him.
Really?
Pretty sure. Yeah. And then he like snorted ants. I think I just saw that. He
Ozzy
confirmed that.
Osbourne did?
Yeah, I just saw that like on TikTok that he like confirmed that he did that. I was like, not surprising, but
Yeah, I remember. Well, when I was a teenager, he was around. That's how old I am. I mean, yeah, that's how old he is actually. That's crazy. Well, I had an interesting week. We are selling our house, moving about 20 minutes south of here. So we had a yard sale on Saturday. Yard sales just are just crazy. I mean,
yeah.
people are just so weird. Like they nickel and dime you over stuff like
Mhm.
it's already $1, right? And they're like, you take 50 cents for that? I'm like, yeah, because I just want you out of my driveway. Like, you know what I mean? Like people just get so weird.
I know, like the professional garage sailors come and they're like, this is
Yeah.
actually worth 25 cents instead of 30.
How do
So,
you know? Yeah, like
yeah, exactly.
why do you care that much about this?
Exactly.
Like get a life. I can think of a million things you could be thinking about besides this stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah, we got rid of a bunch of stuff. But prior to that, on Thursday, I was up in Randolph, Nebraska, and those guys are awesome. I'm gonna show some pictures here. Has had a really good time. I had a picture with the eighth grade girls, because you always have to make fun of them and mess with them. So I start out with getting mad at them. I mean, not getting mad, but like making fun of them. And then by the end of it, they're my best friends. So,
Right.
um, because they're all crazy. But yeah, so we had a good time up there. It's fun being with those guys. And then you had a crazy night last night. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I kind of just woke up like an hour ago. We had prom last night. Didn't get home until like 4:30. I fell asleep at 5 this morning. And yeah, just been sleeping ever since, but it was really fun, so that's good. After
Yeah.
this, I'm gonna go clean up everything, which is lovely, but it was a good time. I think everybody had fun.
Did you now? So you told me that you were the DJ, like you picked the playlist out.
Yeah, me and
How'd
my
that come?
friend. Yeah, it was. I mean, I was worried about it a little bit because, everybody always wants to skip songs and they're like, who added this? But it was really good. And then I was also in charge of the sophomore little dance that they did because we have sophomore servers and we always have them do entertainment. So I choreographed a little dance for them and I think everybody loved that too. So that was really good.
You choreographed a dance for them?
Yeah. Yep. It was like I think I called it like the evolution of popular dances. And I think the most impressive part was I had like the dirty dancing lift in there and I had like five of the guys lift like this one girl. It was great. Yeah.
Wow, look at that. That is awesome. Wow, describe that. What are they doing right now?
Um right now they are doing the YMCA and then this girl, Macy, runs out and she runs kind of into the audience and then she runs into this group. I think it's like five people. We have three guys and two girls, and they're lifting her up, which was scary because I was like, if she falls, like, am I going to be responsible for that? But all the practice paid off and everybody was like surprised and they were like, they loved it. So that was good.
That's awesome. That looks like a really good time. You guys had an
Yeah.
after prom too, right? Don't you guys do a bunch of stuff hanging out and keep
Yes,
everybody off the streets?
we went to Axe Holes in Grand Island. So through Axes, they had an arcade, and it was really good.
That's really cool. That's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. When I was a youth pastor, I used to host a thing called grad night where we would do, if schools didn't have an after prom thing, we would do it for them kind of thing. And I was like that. It was a lot of fun, just bowling and doing
Oh,
different things, ice skating.
oh yeah.
Sometimes we'd rent out a skating rink or something. So it's cool. Well, Delaney, this week I wanted to just ask you. I get to thinking about how, when I'm at a school and I talk to kids about mental health issues and things like that. And, I always have my remedies and what I say. I wrote a book, right? About valuing yourself and all that. But a lot of times I'll talk to kids and they tell me stuff that they tell each other about that, like, things that advice they give and things like that. And so I just wanted to ask you, like, what are some of the things that teenagers talk about when it comes to mental health to each other?
Um, First of all, I think it's kind of less, it has less of a stigma around it than it used to. So that's a good thing. So we definitely talk about it more, first of all. Um, but when we do talk about it, it's still, I mean, it's kind of a taboo subject, you know. Um, Anxiety and depression are kind of popular topics. That sounds bad, but like popular topics that we talk about because it's common being a teenager and it's common being in high school and the world that we live in. So, I mean, just talking about ways to cope with especially anxiety and depression and other things like that has become a big thing for teenagers, at least in my opinion. Like, it's not a sensitive topic anymore, if that makes sense.
When do you think that shifted? Like when you were in middle school or after COVID, or what do you?
I think especially after COVID, because I was in sixth grade when COVID hit. So I was going into seventh grade in 2020, and, it kind of became like a thing, like everybody had something that they were struggling with, especially since COVID. And then once everybody else realized that they weren't alone, it kind of became a thing to talk about like, hey, you're not alone. We're all kind of struggling. Like, I was anxious about this. I became depressed in lockdown. So I think, especially after COVID, yeah, it became kind of more of a everybody's in this together kind of a thing.
Okay. So when you're talking about it, what are some of the things that you guys talk about as far as remedies go? Like, what do you say to each other about it? Like, if you're giving somebody advice right now, randomly, you're not looking up at a book, you're not my book, but you're like, just kind of talking. What would you say?
Personally, something that I always say with, let's say, anxiety in particular, because obviously everyone has some sort of anxiety at some point, whether it's the actual disorder or if you're just nervous about something. But something that I like to think of personally, and I like to tell people if they're anxious about something, is that the worst thing that could happen is it fails. So, like, if you are anxious about, I'll use prom for an example, anxious about tripping and falling, walking on the stage for promenade, like, the worst that could happen is you trip and fall. It's scary, but you're not going to die, Like, people aren't going to remember it. And that's another thing you have to remember with anxiety is that it may mean the world to you, but for everybody else, it's just a few minutes. They're like, wow, that was embarrassing, or wow, I feel bad for her. But, the worst that could happen happened and you're still there. I mean, you just have to kind of imagine yourself in the situation that you're afraid of and then realizing it won't be that bad. You're still going to make it out. And then imagining yourself succeeding too. Like, that's going to set you up for having a better attitude toward things. If you're imagining yourself succeeding, but then you're also imagining the worst that could happen, just, to get it over with in a way.
So you take the mystery out of it, basically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you kind of give them perspective. Like, I want you, just to kind of look at, yeah, I like that. I like that. Like, what's the worst can happen? I mean, play that out in your head already. And yeah, I like that. What are some other things that you would say to a teenager who's dealing with depression or anxiety?
I would say for depression, Um, and it's cliche too, but it's always going to get better. And I think that that's something that everybody says. If they find out somebody is depressed or even just sad about something, grieving or anything like that, it's always going to get better. Um, if you are feeling sad or depressed, I like to imagine like the best day that you've had and the best day that you think you will have. So when you were younger, maybe you went on a vacation to Florida and you went on the beach with your family and it was amazing. If you're feeling sad or grieving or depressed, think about that and remember how much fun you had. And then remember other times too maybe when you were in your depression and you had great days and you had so much fun and you were so happy, like that was a good day. There are always going to be better days. And then imagine a day in the future where maybe you're living without depression, without sadness, or not grieving anymore. And you're just living your life to the fullest and you're having the best days you can. And you realized, it's always going to get better. I think that's the best advice that any teenager could give to someone else.
I think that's great advice. It's one of the things I say in schools. I say the worst day of your life talks to you, and it talks to you and tells you, you should give up. It always paints the picture of the worst case scenario, right? That day says, oh, this will never get better, and you're gonna feel like this for the rest of your life, and it lies. It's basically lying. And what I hear you saying right now basically is tell yourself the truth, because the truth is it does get better. Things do get better. I mean, I've been in some pretty crazy situations growing up, with traumatic things happening, my dad leaving, all the stuff I talk about in schools, but I'm not like it got better. I mean, it does. Time doesn't always heal things, but time and a deliberate, you know, I guess a deliberate plan to, get out of that, right? Is in, tell yourself the truth and get around positive people and that kind of thing. That's good. Is there a lot? Do you think that there's a lot of that going on? Like, I guess my question is, I know that a lot of times parents kind of, we talked about this before, but you know, for whatever reason, blow it off or not take it seriously or whatever. And do you think because of that, there's a lot more self anecdote going on? A lot of kids talking to each other about it because they're not getting the right answers with the people that they, like an adult type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, back to like the stigma thing. Back when you were even younger, I assume, and like when my parents were younger, when everybody's parents were younger, mental health and like all of that stuff wasn't as big of a thing. Like it had that stigma around it. It was kind of a taboo topic. So now that it's becoming more open and people are talking about it more, I think people of older generations just kind of aren't grasping that or don't understand necessarily because back when they were growing up, like it was a thing you don't talk about. So now you're talking about it and it's almost seen as like something you should be ashamed of. And I think a lot of parents think like that. And in a way, it's not their fault because again, it's like it's just the generation you grew up in, but that definitely leads to teenagers and kids like talking amongst themselves, trying to find help in other ways because, it's just a different generation. It has a different stigma and social perception around it.
Yeah, it's interesting. My brother and I do a podcast. We talked about this before, but so last week we kind of unpacked some things about us growing up, in a crazy situation and how we handled it and stuff. Well, the feedback we got was, you know, mainly people our age going, I can't believe you guys are that honest, and wow, and they're blown away at the kind of, the level of vulnerability that we've shown, because you're right, because it's not part of the culture. But one of the reasons why I want to do it is because, especially for those older people, like, that watching our podcast, that my brother and I do, is because when you stuff it, like one of the things I always say in schools is emotion is never satisfied until it's expressed. I want to say that again. Emotion is never satisfied until it's expressed. So it's gonna get expressed. It just gets expressed. If you stuff it, it just comes out in weird ways, right? Like if you think about stuff constantly and you're not working it out, you're not talking about it, you're not thinking about it, it'll haunt you. It'll creep up and start messing with you. And I've noticed a lot of my friends growing up, older people, struggle with substance abuse and anger issues, and like acute anger issues, because that emotion is there. It's just not managed. So I think part of talking about it is managing it in a healthy way. What's your perspective?
I agree on that completely. I mean, it's not shown as much as it is with teenagers, but adults still have suicide rates. Adults still have, you know, so many issues and like crime and everything, even like school shootings, like a lot of them are like 20 something year olds. Like they're not 13-year-olds usually, you know? So even though it's the main demographic of teenagers, like adults still struggle with things. And that's because, like you said, like if you're holding it in, especially for that long, it's going to come out at some point, whether it's self harm, harm to others, substance abuse, like you said, anything like that, it's going to come out at some point. And holding it in for that long only makes it worse. So I agree with that completely.
Yeah, emotion is never satisfied till it's expressed. It's gonna get expressed, and that's what I always think of is how is this gonna express itself? If you're going through something and you stuff it, well, I'm guaranteeing you it's just not gonna go away because you decided not to think it through. You know, it of course it's gonna come out, and it might, like you said, self harm. You know, a lot of times when I'm talking to kids who self harm, it's because they're not man. They've got this traumatic thing that happened, um, or just life is just piling on top of them, and there's no way to talk about it, right? They don't, you know, whether they don't want to go to a counselor or the counselor they're going to is not really allowing that to, you know, that process to happen. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different variables, but yeah, I think that's true. That's why I was wondering about the self anecdotes, because I was a part of a community in Colorado Springs that there was a lot of kids that wouldn't talk to their parents about their stress, and a lot of it was because they were rich. They were from really nice homes and nice situations, so they weren't giving themselves permission to have these issues. And it was right around the time that phones were becoming a big deal and social media was really, you know, becoming more prevalent. Well, they were dealing with a lot of anxiety and fear because of that, and they couldn't tell anybody because they lived in a 5,000 square foot home on a golf course, and they felt like, oh, I can't tell anybody because I shouldn't be sad right now because there are people that have it worse than me, and that was just a recipe for disaster. Because some of the kids would, when they were talking to each other, they were saying, well, you should just take your life because then you'll take the pain away from you. So these kids were taking their lives because they would, because of self anecdotes that were negative. I mean, there's good ones, there's positive ones, but then there's those negative ones, and it was scary. I mean, we got involved down there and started doing a lot of schools, and it was crazy. So I think that's one of the reasons, like a passion of mine, is to help adults be a sounding board for teenagers the right way, right? For them to listen and to hear them out and to understand, maybe not agree with everything that's happening, but to understand fully what you're feeling and what you're thinking, because I think it reveals, you know, it takes a lot of pressure away. I'm gonna give you the last word on this. Go
Um,
Delaney, go Delaney, go Delaney. Sorry.
um, I think personally, what resonated with me with what you just said, um, kind of just that aspect of thinking that other people have it worse than you is something that I have always struggled with because, like, I have a great family, I have a great house, I have a great life. Like, I get everything that I want within reason. Um, so, like, why do I struggle with the things I struggle with? Like, maybe I'm just dramatic about it. And I know a lot of people are like that. I look at like people in the world and I'm like, okay, there's people that are starving in Africa. And that sounds so cliche again. Like there's people that are starving, there's people that are going through war, there's people that are being abused. Like, why am I feeling what I'm feeling like, you know? And thinking that is not going to help you. That just makes it worse. That's the one thing I can say based off of personal experience. You cannot compare yourself to others when it comes to what you're struggling with because everyone struggles differently. Like, you could think that the kid that's parents are multimillionaires is living life and just loving everything. And then the next day you find out that they committed suicide because you just never know. And you can always think that people have it worse than you, and in ways they do, but that's not going to help your situation at all. That's just going to make it worse for you. And that's pretty much all I can say. Just don't
That
compare your situation to others.
100%. I mean, 100%. I 100% agree. And I always say that in schools, don't scale your pain. Because I always worry about that when I talk about my story. It's so traumatic with my mom, that they're gonna like be like, oh crap, I can't tell him, that I'm dealing with depression because my grandmother died or because I'm or whatever, I mean, or I'm just sad today. I mean, I feel like because if you scale it, then you're definitely not going to share that. And
Mhm.
you have a right to your pain. You have a right to your. I've seen things that were minimal, like seemingly minimal, take people down. And then in my own life, like things that that you probably would be like, what? What's wrong with you? And I'm like devastated by it because it's just the way we're wired, the way, our experiences, teach us things. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. You can't scale it. And that's what I'm trying to help parents with. Cause I think sometimes they scale it. They're like, well, you could have it worse, or they feel guilty. Like I'm providing you, these things. So why are you depressed? I'm doing my best as a parent to give you what you want. You shouldn't be depressed. And that's not the right thing to say to a kid that's dealing with, anxiety or fear, because you know, what I want to tell parents is just shut up and listen to them and go, tell me what that feels like for you. And sometimes just that and feeling like they're really listening really helps. I know we kind of went down this rabbit hole of parents, but um, yeah, I think it's really helpful to hear your perspective on that. So awesome. I told you I was going to leave you the last word, but I took it. Sorry.
No, I do have one more analogy that I feel like I should share.
Good.
Just um so I saw this, I don't remember when, but it's always stuck with me. So, when you're younger, maybe like 3 years old, and you get a paper cut, and you could be like screaming and crying because it's the worst thing you've ever felt. Like you've never felt anything worse than that. Um, and you think about that then with other things, like comparing yourself to others. Like, I've never been abused, you have, but like in a way that could be like the worst thing you've ever felt, but the worst thing I've ever felt is still the worst thing I've ever felt, if that makes any sense. You know what I'm
Makes
saying?
a lot of sense.
Like, because you can say other people have it worse than me, and it makes sense, I guess. Maybe someone got stabbed or something, and I just fell and scraped my knee. But that could be the worst thing I've ever felt, just like being stabbed is the worst thing that they've ever felt. So comparing yourselves to others, when you think about it that way, doesn't work at all, because you're still feeling the worst you've ever felt. I think that's
That's perfect way to end this. All right, everybody. Monday night with Mike and
Delaney.
the lady. She's awesome. Delaney, I'm so glad you're doing this with me. You're just such a blessing. I'm glad we're doing this. So, all right, guys, we'll see you next week. I have a busy week next week. I want to be in Nebraska, a couple schools in Nebraska, and then I'm going up to South Dakota, and then I'm moving. So, wow, it's going to be crazy. Crazy week, but I'm excited. So, all right, you guys have a good week. And Delaney, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.